There is a dark history behind the origins of International Mother Language Day that is held every year on the 21st of February, and many will take part in it as an opportunity to celebrate their mother tongue without necessarily knowing how it came about in the first place. The day actually memorialises the killing of students by police for demanding language rights for the language that they spoke. And this is a story that only happened in the 1950s. So in this video, I'm going to tell you about what happened all of those years ago, why UNESCO eventually made February 21st this big international day recognising language rights, in theory to stop something like this from ever happening again. But this video isn't just a history lesson because it kind of raises an uncomfortable question. Because while what happened next is widely celebrated as a victory for language rights, I do want to ask, what happens when a movement that fought against linguistic oppression becomes the foundation of a nation? And how much room is there within that for language diversity? I'm Sophia, I'm the author of How to Kill a Language, and I'm a journalist who writes about language and linguicide, which is the suppression and even erasure of language. And this is my show, The Glottal Stop. To understand why students were willing to risk their lives over a language, we've got to go all the way back to how Pakistan was created in 1947. If you never learned about the partition at school, then this map might be deeply shocking to you, because you might have never learnt that when British India was partitioned, there was no Bangladesh. This is what the map looked like. Rather than Pakistan emerging as a single connected country, it emerged kind of as two wings, so you had West Pakistan and East Pakistan. The idea being that borders were divided on religious lines, mainly Hindus on one side, mainly Muslims on the other. In East Pakistan, the majority language that was spoken by the population, not the only one, but the majority language was Bengali, or as it's known endonymically, Bangla. And this was a linguistic scenario that went ignored by where the power sat, which was in West Pakistan. In 1948, the founder of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, made this declaration.
Let me make it very clear to you, and leave no doubt, that the state language of Pakistan is going to be Urdu and no other language.
Urdu, and only Urdu, would be the state language of Pakistan. This was even though the language was only spoken by a minority of the population. It was largely actually a language of the educated elites who had migrated during the partition. We're talking here about Urdu being made the sole state language. This is the language of everywhere from government to higher education to basically everything in public life. And if you reflect on the history of many countries around the world, you'll be more than familiar with this idea of one language, one nation, or one nation, one language. And not only have we seen that repeatedly throughout history, we've also commonly seen the outcome, which is that one language is given an awful lot of priority and value, and that any other language that is spoken in that country gets devalued, posing serious questions about what happens to the speakers of such languages. Lots of Bengali speakers, including students, understood what was at stake here, and that is when resistance began. From the moment that that policy was stated out loud, people in East Pakistan began to organise. People were asking for Bengali to be made a state language. And again, this isn't unusual, but when a big language question around ethnic identity goes unanswered for too long, it goes from being about linguistic rights to human rights. In January 1952, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Khawaja Nazimuddin, came to Dhaka and he publicly defended the Urdu-only policy again. And because of this lack of progress, activists and students announced a protest date, February the 21st. What followed was a government crackdown. They actually invoked Section 144. This is a colonial-era law to prohibit public gatherings, obviously weaponised as a means of quelling protest movements. Did it stop people wanting to protest? Absolutely not. And so despite this ban on public assembly on February the 21st, people gathered. Plan was to march in Dhaka to the East Pakistan Legislative Assembly to demand recognition of Bengali as a state language. By the afternoon, there were thousands of people, and they were protesters, right? They were unarmed. And at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the police opened fire on them. Several students were killed. People were rightly horrified, and the next day, there was an even bigger protest. A temporary memorial was set up to honour those who had died. It was called the Martyrs' Monument, and in fact, to this day, there is a proper, big, martyr's monument to what happened here. It's called the Shahid Minar. The first one that was set up was taken down. And what was happening was that this language movement was entering a different phase. Like I said before, it had gone from being a language movement to a human rights, a civil rights movement. In the years that followed, the first thing that happened was that the Pakistani state recognised that what they did was wrong. But then about 4 years later, they did make Bengali a state language in East Pakistan alongside Urdu. Now, if you look at a map today, you will know that East Pakistan no longer exists. It's Bangladesh. In 1971, there was a war of independence. And when the war ended, the new state of Bangladesh was created. No surprises for what became the state language of Bangladesh. It was, predictably, Bengali. And in this new nation state, February 21st became known as Martyrs' Day. And each year people go to the monument to place flowers in remembrance of what happened there. Fast forward to 1999, and Bangladesh proposed to UNESCO that the 21st of February should actually be a day that's recognised internationally, not only in Bangladesh, as a day dedicated to protecting mother tongues. And UNESCO accepted that proposal a year later, and hey presto, we have had International Mother Language Day since the year 2000. I'm curious to know if you'd heard of the UNESCO Day but weren't aware of its history in Bangladesh. And if you live in Bangladesh, I'd be very curious to hear how you commemorate the day every year. But I also want to take a moment to reflect on all of this, because I think it's important to not only reflect about what happened, but it's important to reflect on what Bangladesh looks like today and what its language rights look like today. Since an act in 1987, it's mandatory to use Bengali in all government affairs, except foreign relations, and it remains the sole state language of Bangladesh. Is Bengali the only language in Bangladesh? No. Yes, Bengali is absolutely the most widely spoken. There is no doubting that. According to Ethnologue, there are 36 indigenous languages in Bangladesh. Many of them have some kind of endangerment status and little presence in education, in government, or in public life. So to recap, the country that gave the world, that proposed the world a day to honour the mother tongue, today is a country that has one state language and does not guarantee education in minority languages, government services in minority languages, also judicial access in those languages. I'm obviously not for a second saying that Bengali shouldn't be a state language in Bangladesh. I just wanted to point out that there are many nation states where there are many languages within the country which have multiple state languages to try and recognise and protect that language diversity. Isn't it interesting that on a legislative constitutional level, this is not the direction that even Bangladesh has taken? And I do think it's worth observing that when you hear about places or people fighting for language rights, that does not always mean they are fighting for the rights of all languages. February 21st is often presented as this great sacrifice that led to linguistic victory. It is a moment, it's a peg in the calendar every year to remind us that when people's languages are treated as disposable, they will resist. But honestly, for me, as someone who has spent such a long time researching linguicide, I cannot help but look at the day and see how winning recognition for one language doesn't automatically mean protecting other languages. Linguicide, of course, does not always look like police killing innocent people or violence. In my body of work, it actually often looks like bureaucracy. It looks like neglect. It can look like shame. It can look like pitting different languages against each other in terms of value. I found a good article written by someone in Bangladesh that I will link in the description. In it, it says, so far the Bangladesh government has established the International Mother Language Institute in 2010, which has documented only 4 languages of indigenous communities. This article is a couple of years old, so there may have been progress, I don't know. Chakma, Marma, Achik and Tripura, but these indigenous communities have a large population and their language is still alive. Other indigenous languages with small populations are now at a heavy risk of being extinct. I'm talking about Bangladesh in this video because I'm talking about International Mother Language Day and the history behind the 21st of February. This does happen so commonly when people are trying to establish a nation state. It certainly came up as a repeat theme when I was doing my investigations and research for how to kill a language. International Mother Language Day asks us to celebrate our mother tongues, but I do think the history that surrounds it also should encourage us to think about something else. How can we demand language rights that benefit the speakers of all languages and not just the speakers of our language? Thank you for watching, and obviously, here at the Glottal Stop, I like to think every day is an International Mother Language Day.